I made one mistake. First of all, we're going to see a short clip before you start your keynote, because you're also, for those who don't know, you're known as a man who gave a voice to those who weren't being heard in developing countries.
This year, the Arab world erupted as a generation of young people, no longer prepared to suffer in silence, rose up against the hated despots who ruled their countries.
Gaddafi has destroyed our country, and now we can't test the freedom.
The weapons of the activists of the so-called Arab Spring weren't guns and bombs, but the internet and the mobile phone. For the first time in history, world-changing events were recorded hour by hour by the man and woman on the street, and exposing the unimaginable brutality of embattled regimes in other parts of the Arab world.
This was not only a turning point in the history of the Arab world and maybe internationally even. In fact, it was a moment of glory for journalists, for Al Jazeera, when I was at that time the Director General of Al Jazeera and at the middle of the newsroom, reporting all these kind of incidents, but also for the international media. How that happened? By necessity. Not choice. I remember in 2011, I attended many international conferences, and I think maybe many of you did also the same, to discuss the future of media. Because at that time, we were, or not me personally, but a lot of people were worried that these new aliens coming into the industry from the corners of the periphery are actually introducing something not professional, not objective, not fantastic, not polished, as we, editors, supposed to be in our newsrooms. The aliens are these, at that time we used to call them citizen journalists, sometimes the new media activists, sometimes the bloggers. If you remember, this would be 2010 to 2011. In my newsroom, where I was leading Al Jazeera at that time, our editors, most of them, were actually very worried. Why? Because most of them came from that kind of generation that started the career in BBC, then moved to Al Jazeera from BBC at that time, and they have that kind of philosophy that news is following a strict, clear, very, really well-structured methods. And once you shift into this new anarchic world, then we are defying the purpose, and we are not introducing a fine and great journalism. I tried my best, actually. 2008, we started something called the New Media Desk in Al Jazeera. And I recruited only people who were like 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old maximum. And they used to be called the kids in the newsroom, because our elder, great, very well-experienced editors did not really accept them as part of the newsroom. They were condemned to the corner, literally, physically, to the corner of the newsroom. But they started doing something, activities on the internet and so forth, trying to prove themselves. And they were really my most, celebrated team, maybe in the newsroom at that time, because I could see that this is the future. But that future did not become mainstream, but during these events, 2011. And why? Because governments closed down our bureaus, confiscated our equipments. We don't have this professional staff anymore reporting from Tripoli or Cairo or Tunisia or anywhere, or Yemen at that time. So we are lost. And not only that, they even brought down the signals from the internet, from the satellites, where we, of course, we report through satellites. I mean, we broadcast through satellite. They brought down satellites. So literally, there are moments during the beginning of 2011 when Al Jazeera went dark completely. There was no choice in front of us but the kids in the corner. So the kids in the corner were invited to sit in the middle of the newsroom and to take two important missions. Number one, reconnect us with the story in the field. We don't have cameras. We don't have bureaus. No one has camera or bureau. Most of the news agencies were actually shut down. No one can access Tahrir Square at that time or the Tunisian Revolution. So connect us. How? Of course, they have their own friends. They have their network. So they will get the YouTube, they will get the feeds, and slowly, slowly we will have material in front of us. Yes, it is shaky. Yes, it is not high definition. It is not the most fantastic edited pieces, but it does transform the reality into something dynamic. You see it in front of you, not necessarily polished, but informative. And who cares, really, about quality when there is a story about life and death emerging of this huge substance in front of you, and you need to transfer it to the world. So then we pushed all that material on the screen. Okay, now we have a screen that has some content and material. Of course, again, some of our editors were not very excited and happy about this development. But what can you do? Do you have any alternative? No, we don't. So, okay, let us go. Broadcast. We started broadcasting. New challenges emerged. How can we double source it? How can we really make sure that events like this are happening? How can we make sure that we are not deceived, we are not used, in order to broadcast propaganda or to broadcast things that might not be accurate? Okay, that's another challenge. Let us deal with it. How? Through the same kids in the center of the newsroom. Double source it. Connect with your friends. If there is a story coming from one source, I need to be 6, 7 sources. I need all angles of the story. And then let us, as wise editors, sit down and see, will this make sense? Is it reasonable to happen? Add substance, add content, add depth to it, and try to liberate the story from the hegemony of the authorities and get the story from the public and polish it in the newsroom and add value and context and depth to it and put it on the screen. No one is seeing us. We had 2 major satellites actually carrying Al Jazeera signal at that time. Both of them are owned by governments. And these governments, one of them is the Egyptian government, decided to put us down. No one sees Al Jazeera. Again, the guys in the middle, the young guys, decided the following. They said, okay, let us start, broadcasting through live stream on the internet. How many people will watch you on the internet at that time? You are a TV station which has the highest rating in the Arab world, and everyone is hooked to the screen. Would you expect people to go to their computers? People went to their computers. And then the surprise that by the end of that day, 17 public channels, who are, some of them are very small, but some of them are really, interested in what's happening, decided to drop their signal and to carry the internet signal of Al Jazeera on their screens. And suddenly we came back not on our own frequency, on someone else's frequency, and then slowly, slowly, it became a flood of feeds across the Arab world where people continue to watch without the government's approval through satellites networks. So it was the kids in the center. I always remember this moment to say the following. Necessities sometimes push us in the right direction. I remember 1997, I was reporting from South Africa, and then I was called by the newsroom and said, go cover floods happening in Mozambique. And it was Saturday. There was no cameraman. This beautiful, lovely, massive cameras of like about half a ton. You put it in your shoulder and you go to the field. The cameraman was off that day, and I couldn't find the cameraman. I decided something without telling the newsroom. I took my small camera. At that time was a new mini DV. You remember these small cameras, mini DVs? I took it there and I filmed myself. And then I came back to my computer. I edited. The first time in my life I did that. And I said, listen, I will send it to them. If they broadcast it, that's fine. I'm not going to tell them I committed this crime. And I did that, actually. When I went to feed it from Associated Press in Johannesburg, they refused. They said, what nonsense is this? This is a domestic camera. How can you broadcast from here to the TV station? I said, it's not your business. Just do it. And then we connected the wires and we broadcast exactly from the small, silly camera at that time. And then I sat in front of the screen that evening to watch. Will Al Jazeera adopt my story? And yes, Al Jazeera had it a headline. And my TV, my report, which was edited on a small computer, filmed by a mini DV camera, is actually live on TV. And then I decided to continue doing this. 6 months later, I visited the headquarters. And then, because I felt guilty, I confessed my crime to the managing director at that time, and I told him what I did. And really, he liked the idea. I said, you know what you are doing now? Reducing the cost. You know, if I buy these small cameras and distribute it to the guys in the field, it's much easier and cheaper for me than these massive cameras that cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if they are broken or, you know, confiscated or stolen in the field, then I'm losing a lot of money. And then all correspondents of Al Jazeera, from that moment, started adopting the same small cameras and the same small, you know, laptops and editing their own reports. And then we have a one single person covering the story, reporting and editing. It was necessity. It was not choice. So my advice always to the teams of Al Jazeera all over the world, don't shy away from making mistakes. And when you make the mistake, I will hold you accountable. And maybe I will punish you even, but I will admire you. Do it. And this is how you evolve. You don't evolve when you are restrained by one psychology, one way of thinking, by laws and regulations and the systems, and you become a prisoner of the past. No. This is why we need always to rethink ourselves and use sometimes these kind of necessities to advance something that we know it is the trend of history moving ahead. That was important. The most important for all of us now is to ponder on the following. From 1997, when I did that crime of reporting from a small mini DV, until today, when everyone has his broadcasting machine in his hand, in his smartphone, where the future is. It is brilliant. Yes, we as professional journalists might feel a little bit not easy because we find ourselves out of space, and you know what? We have been working hard to get here. And suddenly these small kids are competing with us. Yes, they are competing with us. Why? You know why? Because in a moment of time, mainstream media became a center of power on its own. While we're supposed to be witnesses of reality for the public and trying to really advance the cause of good, in a moment of time, we became part of this culture of political and corporate system that used us to preserve a status quo against the masses and against the periphery. It happened to us in the Arab world. It happens everywhere in the world. This is why when the public take it in their own hands and start reporting, they are liberating themselves from us, not only from their centers of powers, not from their governments, not from those who own. They are actually taking things into their own hands. They are democratizing media as it's supposed to be, bringing it back to be the voice of the public rather than the voice of the elite attempting to, you know, represent the public. That's important. However, I want to end by the following note. Some of you might ask now, okay, you are telling us about this glorious moment in the Arab history when the people marched in the streets and they did all that. Where are they now? We see only ISIS coming, blowing themselves up in our streets. We see, you know, crazy things happening. The Arabs have gone mad. And the Muslims are really not, you know, doing the most marvelous job in the universe. So where is this spirit of a Tahrir Square? Where is this spirit of networking amongst well-educated young people who were dreaming of achieving democracy and freedom for their own societies? It is still there. It is still there. And it will continue. This is not a moment that we can reverse. Once you taste some freedom, you will never give it up. And our guys will never give it up. But they were overwhelmed by counter-revolutionary forces that marginalized them, put them in jail, suppressed them, and even, you know, kill them. But that is temporary. You know why? Because all these kind of forces that fight against freedom and democracy, they have no imagination about the future. They don't know how the future should look like. They cannot convince even themselves about what will happen tomorrow. This is why they open more jails and they kill more people. But the young guys in the street are still having the same imagination of the future. And because that hope was, in a way or another, there was an attempt to murder that hope, we have this kind of extreme, crazy moment again of people resorting to violence and abandoning every kind of sense. And you say this, and always I say, during the last 5 years, we had the most beautiful image of us, and still we have also the most ugly image of us emerging now. But what will win? It is a process, and the good will always win. Just, I will refer you to the following. 30 years, this continent, which we are standing now enjoying, democracy, went through 30 years of religious wars. You remember? I don't remember, of course, that was in the 17th century. And 1/3 of the population were killed. Imagine if we had smartphones in 1642, and we showed the people how 1/3 of the continent was murdered by their own neighbors and their own friends and their own citizens. It was very ugly scene. It was also very ugly scene even in the French Revolution of 50 years until stability, or the Civil War in Spain, or the Civil War in America, or the First World War and the Second World War. It was always ugly. Transformation has never been lovely, and it never been Disneyland, really. It always used to have that kind of... But I hope we are not going to go into that again. And I think the Arabs and Muslims in the world are right now going through a major transformation. Not only in politics, in culture, in religion, in the way that they perceive reality, and the way they can reconcile themselves with the future. And of course, the world itself is going through transformation, not only us. This is why I am advocating now the concept of this kind of partnership between all people who like freedom and democracy across the world, and social justice. Not only Arabs. It's not an Arab issue or a Muslim issue. And this is why when I view diversity, I don't view diversity as an added value. So, okay, let us respect Islam by giving a talk show about Muslims. Or let us respect the Asians or the Africans or the colored or whatever. No, it should become the mainstream philosophy from within. This embedded nature in us. I started, recently something called Common Action Forum. It's an NGO based in Madrid. And I was fascinated by participants from Latin America, from South Africa, from Asia, from Europe, sitting together, sharing ideas and thoughts about change and democracy and freedom of expression. And we found ourselves one team. That is the spirit of real diversity. The spirit of real diversity is to unify ourselves on higher purpose, rather than try to add some kind of cosmetic, additions in order to look tolerant. I think that is the message which Arab Spring introduced to us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Wadah. Great speech. Okay, we've got some time for me to ask you a few questions. I don't know if we're going to... Okay, no, we'll just go ahead. Robert Young from Google also picked up on this idea of, we need to embrace failure or making mistakes. You did it yourself just in your talk. But the thing is, when we're inviting young, inexperienced in terms of media making bloggers to contribute to the media news making kind of sphere, and it's in times of media regime change, for instance, a mistake can cost a life. It can mean a blogger goes to prison. So is it responsible to embrace that?
Of course. If you ask me as a manager of organization, I'll tell you, I will ask all my employees to abide by certain kind of laws and regulations, especially in danger areas.
But you will admire them if they break the rules.
And I will ask them to be trained as well in order to go to the field. But if you ask me as a journalist in the field, I will tell you I will take a chance. So it is, if you ask me as a journalist who reported Afghanistan and Iraq and South Africa before that and the continent of Africa altogether, I'll tell you I took a lot of chance. And I thought that brave journalism was the essence of transforming this reality into the people, from information into knowledge. You have to be there.
But
and
at 18, are you a journalist?
Yes, you are a journalist, but you have a mission. And always I say, if a journalist doesn't have a mission, he's a bad journalist. You know, journalism is not only for you to find a job and a good salary or fame. Journalism is for you to really, really embed yourself with the public and really keep your eye always on the interest of the people and you know, the point is, we are flooding people's minds sometimes with data and information, which is useless. Give them knowledge, give them context, and try to introduce to them. This is why I speak about diversity. I could have never reported Afghanistan if I couldn't really understand the Afghani culture, Afghani history, and the Afghan way of thinking, because the interpretation of any event without kind of cognitive framework is going always to be simplistic and failure.
So the established media houses, also here in the Netherlands, they're failing the people. They're not.
I'm saying that the established media has to revolutionize itself, go back to the principles of what journalism is all about. And yes, to a large extent, once you embed yourself with a corporate interest, with a financial interest, or with a political agenda, you are a bad journalist. In fact, you are conspiring against your own mission.
Wow, is that why you talk very passionately? Is this also part of the reason you left Al Jazeera, perhaps?
No, actually, I left Al Jazeera for one reason. I spent 8 years as a Director General of Al Jazeera. Frankly speaking, in a moment I woke up and I found that there is nothing much I can add. And I would like to go beyond, you know, the traditional media reporting. This is why I went out. I started Huffington Post Arabic. I started many other websites and digital platforms and so on. And also it liberated Al Jazeera from me because I don't
They were fed up with you.
Exactly. You can't continue forever. I mean, you need in a moment to be brave and to say, I have done whatever I could. Someone else has to continue. And I need also to say, I want to liberate myself from this and go freely, do something new.
Yeah, because now you work exclusively in the digital space. Okay, let's look at Sense Steps. Who inspired you? Who's been your inspiration in your broadcasting career?
Okay. In politics, it was Nelson Mandela, no doubt about this, because I covered his story from 1994, and I translated his first book that was written, and it was magnificent. And he taught me diversity and tolerance. In his book, when he stood in 1994, next to him, the guys who put him in jail, and he brought his guards from prison to celebrate with him that moment, I cried that day. I cried because I noticed to what extent a human being could transcend himself into a giant morally while he was in 27 years oppressed in that dark cell.
Yeah. And another question from Sense Steps. Yes, okay, a huge compliment. The world needs more people like you, more Wadahs. How did you come to this genius idea of physically moving the kids from the corner room to the center?
It was necessity. At the center of a newsroom, maybe
they're just too loud.
We have something called the production desk, you know, because you have the news gathering desk, you have the production desk, you have the output desk, and the production desk normally in the middle of the newsroom. So producers are the well-calculating, lovely, experienced, magnificent people who have inherited this from their forefathers and ancestors, and they know exactly what to do about it. Now, when that desk became useless, practically, because we don't have correspondence, we don't have news gathering, we don't have anything else, then you need to bring the kids to put them there to run the actual stories. Edit, paste, put on the screen, and under the supervision of people who might be frustrated, but they can't do much, but actually approve the report of the kids.
Wonderful, good stuff. Now, Wadah is with us for the rest of the afternoon, right? So you guys, we've got, unfortunately, no more time to ask questions, but please stick around.
Thank you very much.
Go and grab them if you have questions. Thank you very much, Wadah.